with another news roundup from the Crowdsourced Politics podcast crew. And today I'm joined by the ever lovable Art Black.
How's it going?
And today we have some interesting news to go over. If you may not know, the Crowdsourced Politics Facebook group, and yes, we are still a Facebook group, was shut down by Facebook 2 weeks ago. And then over the weekend, Facebook put pretty much every single group that is dealing with, even tangentially, the American political discourse on mandatory post approval. So if you are a mod or an admin for the group, you have to approve the post. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the election. So let's go ahead and get to it. Assuming that Art's video comes back.
Okay.
Really? All right, you're back. I got you. Let's deal with it.
Do you want me to try on the other?
No, you're already set up. It's all
iPad
good.
if you want?
It's all good. You're already set up. It's fine. We're good. You're on camera. We can hear you and everything, so we should be fine. So, Art, what are your thoughts? We talked about this the other day, but what are your thoughts about how Facebook is going with this whole thing? Do you think we're gonna end up coming back, or what's up?
I think that Facebook's model is changing, and especially now that they're kind of getting a grip on the effect that they're having on society and the weird polarization and the kind of a political extremism that it breeds. I think that there's an interest in the tech community to, I think, ease back on some of the things they've been doing to get themselves here, and to set up an entirely new system where I think that we're going to see a lot more. I don't even want to say Orwellian, because it's not that. It's not necessarily even bad, but it's just the kind of big data guidance for our society going forward that they're kind of coming to grips with. They don't necessarily know what it is or how to do it, but they know that the effect that they're having on society is basically reshaping it. And they can't just let that happen unattended. So one way or another, they're going to tinker with it and try to come up with some balanced solution that allows them to make money without basically ripping American society apart. And it's no easy task. It's totally uncharted waters. And as far as what it's going to entail for like political debate groups, that's actually weirdly probably a large part of what they're wrestling with right now, because there's a lot of interest, both foreign and domestic, to pump out information and misinformation. So even putting aside, let's just pretend that they're neutral and wish to give a good forum for just honest debate and information. That alone is a massive amount of power that we would normally constrain to a government to kind of figure out how that would go.
Mm-hmm.
And it could very easily facilitate, under legal honest discussion, all kinds of terrible, awful things, fascism, racism, uh any phobia under the sun could be had under a legal discourse. And so on one hand, they're wondering, do they want to be party to that? And that's just pretending that everything's on the table, above board. What do you do when it's actually not above board, and you're talking about people who are foreign actors or domestic disinformation agents who couldn't care less about honesty or truth or even the best interests of the country, and are simply here to infiltrate and subvert and destroy? So it's a massive problem, and it's one of those things where people have talked about it for years, but we're now kind of coming up against it. And Trump's Twitter feed's like the perfect example. They've already put out that once he gets to February or so, they're going to take off the restrictions that they've had on it to allow him to violate the terms of service. And he's just going to be any other user. That sounds like nothing, but it's also has his supporters up in arms, because misinformation and being able to say whatever he wants is kind of part of his power. So to
Right.
take that away, it has massive repercussions. And to say that nobody in the future will have the kind of power Trump wielded, he found an early exploit in video game terms and he used it. But now the devs are going to patch it, and they're going to nerf one of the most powerful weapons that's really ever entered the game. So I think we're just in a lot of uncharted territory right now, and that's what we're feeling is this change as we get into uh, uh, just even with the republic, just somewhere we've never really been, and we don't super seem to be emotionally and morally at our best right now.
Mhm.
So it's a strange place to be. So the short answer is that I have no freaking idea, other than it seems like there are people who are looking at it very seriously from the big picture, big tech side.
No, that's a very fair point. I think one of the there's talk on Facebook and there's other places about what is and is not permissible as far as like a free speech kind of deal, and we can talk about or we can ignore the fact that it's not a violation of free speech legally, um, in the kind of ethic, I guess, of free speech. It kind of is because everybody's like pretty much against, not everybody, but a lot of people are against censorship in general. But the conversations that I've had with people online has been like, well, you got to slow down the spread of disinformation somehow. Making moderators do more work is one way to do it. Um, but shutting down groups that might be causing or violating terms of service is another thing. You're willingly engaged on this platform, though it's a huge platform, and they can at any times tell you to just go away.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to the discussion, but I think that that's basically where we're at. Is we're kind of at a crossroads, and it's anybody's guess how it's going to go. Even now, if you think about how much information matters, we have around the White House, as we're speaking, there was currently a wall, but they're putting up a larger wall around the other wall. Uh, and apparently we're devolving into this kind of like coup theater where Trump is shaking his fist in the White House saying I'll never leave, and like the funny thing about all this in a really darkly comedic way is that nobody takes it seriously. Like if this was happening in some foreign country somewhere, we'd be like, oh wow, the president just apparently lost an election and he's barricading himself in the royal palace, and it looks like he's vowing never to leave, and all that. And with us, like at a certain level, like we all kind of know it's fake and nobody's taking it seriously. But on the other hand, it is actually happening. Like he is
Yeah,
like doing all of these things, but there's this weird blurry line where it's like a lot of Trump supporters are just in this weird LARPy kind of like it's almost like this role playing thing where they're pretending that they're patriots fighting back for America, and as long as they all like clap, and Tinkerbell will come back. Like they there's this weird detachment from reality where they're like, as long as we engage with the narrative, we're good. Like Trump says he's not leaving, so he's the real president, and take that, libs, ha ha ha. And from the outside looking in, you're just like, this is it's deranged, but it's also not serious. Like it's just
yeah.
this weird gray area of unexplored territory where we have a reality star, president for any future civilizations or aliens who found this tape after we've blown ourselves up. Probably by the end of the year, they'll be like, "Wow, these cats didn't take any of this shit seriously up to the very end. Like they're just like, this all happened, and they're just like making memes and laughing about it." Yeah, I mean, in a weird sense, nobody is taking it seriously, and it's almost likely going to come to nothing. But there is this weird chance where, oh well, actually, maybe there's a coup and everything is just riddled with incompetence, and somehow he pulls it off, and then we blow ourselves up, or who knows what happens. But most likely, this is just all this weird theater, just to assuage his ego and make his supporters feel better and raise some money. And it's just,
Got to pay off the debts, his campaign debt somehow, right?
yeah. But 50 years ago when Nixon uh, got cornered in the White House, all of the Watergate stuff was coming to light.
Mhm.
And you had Barry Goldwater. And so the Senate Republicans come in and are like, hey, you know, like I mean, this is ridiculous. We don't have your back. Like, this is just, you can basically choose to leave. You're going to get dragged out. Like, it's done. It's over. And it was just a different era where we actually had like serious people who were like in charge of things, and even if we disagreed politically, at the end of the day, like we weren't morons. Like these were people who were serious and took their job seriously and took the long term viability of the republic seriously. And now this is just like it's just as many clowns as we can stuff in the car to just drive around DC and pop out in front of a camera. It, and it's never really come to bite us in the ass before. Like we've always just had this type of like infrastructure and this organization was so
Institution,
strong. I'm sorry.
institutional integrity. Just
The
agreeing with
institutions
you.
were so strong, exactly, that you could do anything with them. It's almost like, getting into an argument with Superman and just like flipping him off and hitting with sticks, whatever. You're just like, he's a nice guy. He doesn't want to melt you. So, like, yeah, in theory, what you're doing is incredibly stupid. But in practice, people are so used to being, just so safe because they're shielded from the consequences of their actions that they'll just now we're at this point where we're just like, hey, you know what? Let's set Superman on fire. He's not going to do anything. We're good. Like, just fuck this guy. Like, we're in this weird off the rails thing where we're like, at some point you actually are going to piss him off, and could go really badly for everybody. But uh, I don't know. The Republicans have become increasingly detached from any kind of ethical or moral anchoring, and it's like they're just lost in this TV show where they're like acting in, and or even if the ones who were cynically involved at first, who is it that says that, I think maybe it's Vonnegut, who's like, you become who you pretend to be, so be careful what you pretend to be.
Yeah, sounds right.
Even the most cynical of people who get involved in all of these weird antics eventually get corrupted by it. And you eventually do turn into that thing. And, from like Lindsey Graham to eventually even the more, you know, grounded ones like Mitch McConnell, like eventually it stops being an act and you get sucked into it. And for a lot of Republicans on the ground level, you're seeing that where like the QAnon stuff and all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories Trump pushes, it just becomes this parallel reality they just choose to live in. But it affects the leaders too. I mean, eventually people just they make bad decisions, and I feel like liberals, people on the left, people in the middle, uh, don't understand it, and a lot of times they're blind to the danger of it. And I find that really, really terrifying. I think more than anything is that there's this sense of like, oh, they're just acting. It's fake. This doesn't really matter. This is real. What they're saying isn't true, and because it's not true, it doesn't matter. When in reality, it not being true, it matters a lot. And the fact that they're doing it anyway, and they know it, and they don't care, it's a big problem. It's
Huge
it's
problem.
it's a it's incalculably large problem when you have that many people who are willing to disregard reality. It's
It
hard to really calculate.
it seems to me that I don't know if it's so much that people are willingly engaged in an alternate reality so much as it seems to be more of this is going to get us votes, and we want to do everything that we can in order to get and maintain our power, in order to do what we believe is moral. And the Republicans, and especially the people, the ideologue Republicans or conservatives, have a vastly different version of what is and is not moral than liberals. Um, even discounting the far left, leftists, like just between liberals, there's a mass gap between what ideological Republicans, conservatives think, and ideological liberals think is what is and is at this point.
Well, oops.
Oh, oh no, got disconnected. Looks like we lost Art. Art, are you still with us on Discord? Man, all kinds of problems today.
And I'm back. See me?
Yeah, just give me a second. I have to mute.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
yes,
that
I
was
gotta
fantastic.
get you another link.
Uh,
No, you don't have to do anything. I have to get your video back in. That's all.
okay. Oh wow, that's a great shot of me just stuck there frozen, huh? Fantastic. Yeah, so the funniest thing, I literally just reached like and brushed past my mouse, and somehow I hit the only place on the screen that would X out of OBS. So,
That's
like,
funny.
I'm just like, how did I even manage that? I just brushed against it. So, uh, ninja skills right there.
Well, I will get
What was
your
it?
video back in a second. I had just said that there seems to be a large gap between what ideological Republicans think is moral and what even run-of-the-mill liberals think is moral.
Yeah, I mean, in a weird sense, there's some stuff that we all kind of agree on, like, hey, it would be nice if we all had more jobs and more money, and we kind of had a nice environment, and uh, you know, I kind of dovetail. I don't know, or seems to fall off pretty quickly, but
Yeah.
um, we have this vague sense of like, like at the individual level, as far as the voters, we all more or less just kind of like the same stuff, and we, kind of want the same, you know, higher general sense of like, hey, I'm doing what I was in the past. Like everyone kind of has this internal barometer as far as like, what's the
Right.
trajectory of my life going? Is it going better or is it not going better? And you multiply that across the birth of the country, you're more or less going to have the same kind of set of factors will play into it. So for a government that's trying to manage these types of people, there's different ways to appeal to those sorts of barometers of all of your constituents. And there's also some that don't really matter, but you get really well paid for. Like for instance, like whether you not you own like a bump stock for your
Mhm.
AR-15, like does that really matter? Like that actually is a fact thing. It's not like in a tangible sense, but it makes certain people feel really good, and you get really well paid for it by other people. So like, there's politicians that will work in certain lanes to make sure that certain things are attended to, even though they don't really uh, d- doesn't really put any more food on your plate. It doesn't give you a bigger house. It doesn't pay off your student loans. Like there's just a lot of the weird, like almost symbolic stuff that we spend a lot of time fiddling with that we call moral. We say it's this big, kind of a moral issue, and this is true of the left. True. I mean, to be honest, like you could
Mhm.
say something like, trans rights, where it's certainly very important for a small number of people, and it's also important in the broader sense that uh, any of us that aren't free, hurts the freedom of all, and it's important that we, in the service of equality, try to take care of everybody. But still, you're looking to fix certain lanes. So, I guess when you talk about like morality between like the left and the right. Yeah, it really just kind of gets down to, how selfish you're trying to get and how you're trying to attend to a certain, smaller subset of people and, take care of them versus how universal your appeal is. And
Right.
that's probably our biggest concern is like, are we trying to take care of the rich or those directly beneath the kind of middle class, or are we trying to take care of everybody? And depending on what group you're in, what group you want to take care of, and where you kind of see your bread getting buttered, that's where a lot of our moral distinctions will come into play. It's really just kind of, who you want the government to take care of.
No, I think that is also true, but I'm not entirely. No, that's a good point about rank and file people talking about the broader base of people that they want to take care of or help.
How do you see, like when you said morality, I feel like I answered the wrong thing.
No,
So
you
what
answered
where
you
do you
answered the you answered mostly. It's just whenever I think of an ideological conservative, I think of someone like Mitch McConnell or a a Mitt Romney is more tempered, but what he believes to be done vastly different than what you know maybe a Dick Durbin or Ted Kennedy would want to
Yeah.
believe it.
Well, I wouldn't even say McConnell's all that ideological. Let's say like more of like a Rick Santorum, or somebody who
Right,
actually,
right.
if you have a host of questions, he'll have a set of answers. Your Ben Shapiro kind of a uh, traditionalist,
Yeah, but
social
McConnell
conservative.
like stop wanted to stop everything Obama did, not just because he disagreed with it, but because it was mostly for power, but it was also because he disagreed with a lot of it. Like,
Yes, but I would just, I guess where I draw the distinction is that I don't think that McConnell wakes up at night and shakes his fist at the idea of gay marriage. I think that Rick
oh, okay,
Santorum probably does roll over in his sleep and worry that the institution of marriage is being, damaged by the gay. Whereas I think that McConnell, it's a lot more about the numbers. He gets really well paid. His wife has, financial shipping interests and all that, and for them, it's like, oh, hey, lower taxes, lower regulation. Um, I get a lot of money from the gun industry. I get a lot of money from big pharma. Like,
gotcha.
that's the kind of conservatism that I don't think of as ideological. That's like conservatism incorporated, where if you hold the right views, that people like paying you for, and you have this kind of big corporate sponsorship for, then you kind of change the wording a little bit when you sell it to the people underneath, and then you talk about rugged individualism, and America's a free country, and gun rights, and bootstraps, and all that. So you just take basically what works for the rich, and you just like convert the almost you run it through the translator, and you just sell it to the poor under different arguments. That's a different version of conservatism to me. I think that's the one that's actually the most predominant one, and
Right.
it's why even the social conservatives, they're just weirdly tolerated because they show up, but like they're not actually. Nobody's going to let them run anything. Like the Rick Santorums, they're never going to run like the American Republican Party. Like it's going to be people like Mitch or Mitt or Trump who, at the end of the day, are looking at the checkbook. Like they're not looking at the Bible. Like none of those guys really give a crap about any social issues, except to the extent that it mobilizes people to show up and vote for lower taxes.
But you don't think that they gave people uh, a UBI, they would increase sloth, detriment to the country?
I think that whether or not they believe that, they'll say it because there's concern that they would have to tax the rich to get there. So, like, as far as what they believe, you could probably sit down with Mitch McConnell, who's a smart guy, and show him some good economic arguments for UBI, and he might go, "Oh, that makes you know what? Between you and me, it makes a lot of sense, but we ain't gonna fucking do it."
I'm not gonna do it
And
because it's gonna cost a rich person some money.
yeah, because we would have to implement that, and that will come out of the bottom line. And we're to do that. Like we're look out pro business party. We're here to look out as this. So, while I like the idea of the businesses getting more money, I think that they'd rather just keep the money they have, and it's easier for me to sell it to those guys. That's just the way that they would prefer to do it. So, if the whole country starves, but we have a couple corporations that keep getting paid, they are going to keep paying me. So, great plan. We ain't doing it. Whereas you'd have other people like Rick Santorum who'd be like, no, like, you need to get up at 5 a.m. and bootstraps and work, and minimum wage, and we shouldn't even have a minimum wage. You should be happy to work for nothing, and that's and that sort of thing. There are people who are wired like that who will absolutely be conservative and give you that argument. No question about it. Uh, I just think that the higher up you go within the GOP, it's way less about any kind of ideology. Uh, the same thing as the Democrats. Like there are certainly left-leaning folk in the Democratic Party, but the higher up and higher up you get, like once you get to like the Feinstein, you know, um, Chuck Schumer level, it's really just performative. I mean, at most, like these guys, they're kind of the same thing. They understand what keeps the Democratic Party, well funded, and you know, who shows up to vote, who shows up to donate, and they're going to take care of who shows up to vote and who shows up to donate. And they'll use a little bit of the ideology as window dressing, but the left version of Rick Santorum isn't going to get anywhere in the Democratic Party. Not,
So you,
I mean, unless they power through it, like the way Trump did on his side.
uh-huh.
In theory, you could do that on the left as well. It's just we haven't had a Trump show up on that side.
It would be a lot harder because of the fact that primary system proportional, more or less a proportional. So
Yeah, it's certainly not impossible. I mean, Trump wouldn't have worked except that he had 16 opponents. Like, I love how people talk big, like, "Oh, Trump beat 16 people." Well, yeah, he beat them with a very small number because the
yeah,
vote was super divided.
well,
Like, if
he was getting about a third. So
by the end, yeah,
no, like in
but
the
I mean,
beginning too. The top
yeah,
three were about 70% or so of the
right.
total Republican Party, and then the rest of them
But
made up the other 30.
my point is that if you have like a Donald Trump in a race, and then you have like 16 standard Republicans,
Oh yeah,
anybody that
it's gonna dilute the vote. Don't get me wrong. I get that.
that's all. It's like Ted Cruz easily would have won had it just been like Ted Cruz and Trump. Like one on one, there was no contest back then, but he was just never able to get ahead because you had, the entire platoon was in there trying to,
Gotcha.
get a little
Yeah,
bit of
that's
the
true.
action. So
That's true to a degree. Yeah.
I mean, now it would be totally different. I mean, Trump could run against,
Oh yeah.
15 people or one person, and he still would. If he runs again in 2024, which I certainly hope happens, um,
God help us. Uh,
only only because, well, let's just say that you could run 10 guys against him or one guy. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He's going to absolutely just
Blow him out
destroy
of the
that.
water.
Yeah,
Him or his kids at this point.
yeah, and that's also fantastic. It's not great for the republic, but it's great in that, like, once Trump loses, like, we're only in the bit of a dangerous period right now where Trump's not competent enough to pull off any kind of coup. There's no legal threat. Like, this is all for show. Like, every legal analyst looks at this as just like, what are they doing? Like, they're
Yeah,
not
all
even.
the lawsuits have been jokes. Like he could have actually seriously did some sort of a couple of lawsuits to actually get it from court, but all the ones that they filed have been stupid.
Yeah, and I mean, the real trick is like he could have filed for a recount in Wisconsin, and they're like, "Oh, it's perfect. All you have to do is just drop off a check for $3 million."
Yeah.
Mysteriously, no one's shown up with any money. It's almost as if they know perfectly well that this is pointless. Like, this is all for show. Like, they're not even doing the recounts. They're talking about it and they're talking about all this stuff, but even the court things that they're doing are like low effort. They're not even done correctly in most cases. They're
Yeah.
0 for 10 as of right now,
Yep.
and there's there's just nothing to it. Like, this is all for show. It's just performative. So
There was the one lawsuit that he did. I want to say it was in Arizona where there's two. So I don't know where either one. I'll just go over to two really stupid ones. One where it was like, was there any Republicans doing ballot observation? And the lawyer's like, yes. Boom. Case dismissed.
well, it was, yeah. I mean, it was even better because the judge goes, he's like, we did have our observers in there, and the judge goes, you didn't have any observers, and the lawyer goes, well, there was a non-zero amount of observers in the room. And the judge is like, so you're saying that you had observers in the room? And the lawyer's
Yeah.
like, yes. And the judge is like, get out. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, this is
It
the
is
most low
incompetent
effort
to
stuff.
the 10th degree.
And I mean, that's not even getting into the Four Seasons lawn care. Like, that's the kind of stuff where, like, you can't even script how inept that is. Like, that's pioneering. Like, that's the kind of, like, third world, junta kind of
Right?
I mean, it's not even like, even like your average like military coup in some other country is going to be generally halfway competent. You'll have some people who will show up with, some ballpark plan of how to take things over, and either kind of go or won't go. But this is just, it's like a badly scripted TV series where we're just all forced to take it seriously because the guy who is running the show is technically also the president of the United States. So it gets this weird amount of credibility that it doesn't deserve, except that it sort of does because it's like, oops, well, like, what if he goes crazy and kills us all? Ha ha ha. So
Ugh.
there weirdly is that, like, angle, but that aside, like, the idea that he could actually do anything, like, no, the lawsuits are junk. No, th-
Yeah. And then there was the other lawsuit in question was, I think it was like 53 ballots that somebody told somebody else were fraudulent. And they're like, and the judge is like, isn't this hearsay? And the guy's like, no, like she witnessed it and heard it from somebody else. So hearsay.
yeah, no, I absolutely heard it myself when that other person said that
Person
they
said
saw it.
it.
It it's just buffoonish, and again, the only reason we have to take it seriously is because sadly we do. Um, but this whole idea of like he's not leaving, it's like, well, he doesn't have to leave. Like, his powers expire. Like,
Yeah.
they
The
actually
Secret
don't
Service will
discontinue.
take him out.
Yeah, I mean, they'll nicely show him out. I mean,
Yeah. I don't mean like they'll kill him or nothing, but
oh yeah, but I
he
mean,
will be escorted out of it.
oh well, sir. Thank you for staying with United States Secret Service, and Bob and Steve will continue on as your personals for the in
Yeah.
retirement. But you know, you're,
And the GSA has already
time,
said
time to
that
go.
Biden's like president elect. Like it's done.
Yeah, not only that, but like other serious countries in the world, like even the ones that he is allied with, like India, Saudi
Israel.
Arabia, Israel,
Israel. I
everyone.
was
Like,
surprised about. I was a little bit surprised about Israel. Like,
yeah. Well, it's
I'm
because,
not surprised that they recognized it. I'm surprised that they said anything. You know what I mean?
well, no, but I mean, the reason that I'm not is, or I should say, the reason that's different is that within the U.S., like, the Republicans are incentivized to go along with the nonsense because they feel they're either trapped or they're just like stooges. Like, they're either witting accomplices or they're performatively going along with it because they feel they have no choice, which isn't true, but that's how you
Right.
get
I
corrupted.
understand.
But like outside the country, nobody's going to play with that. Like they know perfectly well that Biden won. They have to deal with him like in February. So none of these people
It's
are,
true.
like for other countries that like do take their interests seriously, that have serious governments and all that, that
Hmm.
they're just humoring Trump at most. But most of them aren't even doing that. Like everyone from Canada to and honestly probably China at this point. You know, I'm sure the whole world has reached out to Biden at this point and be like, hey, well,
Yeah, see you in a
yeah,
few months.
great. And you know, none of this other stuff's real. Like these other countries, they're not going to play along with this, and or I should say that they're all used to this sort of thing in, I guess, a weird way from other countries, and they know how this is going to end, even if the Trump supporters don't. The only problem for us is that the fact that the Trump supporters don't know how it's going to end,
Mhm.
and they're taking a lot of this weirdly seriously, is
Yeah.
the big problem for us long term. But that's the problem that they're trying to create. Like the GOP is trying to make this a problem to make these people feel cheated, even though they weren't. And there's no legal outcourse or recourse for this for them. Like they're just going to pout about it and be sad. But even then, like it's weird. Like I talked to a lot of people online, just kind of go back and forth, and they're repeating stuff that other media sources have told them. But you poke them a little bit, and it's like even they don't really seem to believe it. Like some of them do, but it's almost like a LARPy thing where they're just like, "Ha ha ha, lives, you Trump got you once, 2016, he's gonna get you again." Ho ho ho. I don't know. Half of them seem like they're bots anyway. Like I feel like
Oh, a
real
lot of them
people.
are.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't see it.
I, I'm fairly certain that that one where it was that responded to me where they were like, "It's our turn next," and it was the image of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah,
Pretty sure that was a
charming.
bot too, but still, that's some scary shit.
Yeah. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Yeah, no problem. So everybody, is there anybody on watching us? Hey, nope. But yeah, so dead air. Yeah, I do find it interesting that the Republican base itself is being still riled up. And one of the things, and I'll ask Art about this when he gets back, is it's being done in order to try to sway people in the Georgia election. I was trying to avoid dare to air, so what I was saying, wondering out loud, is the Republicans are still trying to like gin up their base on
Oh, right.
the fake elections and things. And so I was thinking aloud, are they doing it in order to keep the what little momentum they have going to help with the Georgia Senate races?
Hmm.
And of
Well,
course, it's also to, like as we said earlier, it was also to help Trump pay down his debts. But I'm more
oh,
concerned about the Georgia.
yeah. That's the weirdest thing of all is like this is obviously just a scam. Like it I really worry about like a lot of just our fellow Americans getting scammed. Like you hear about people stealing from Nigerian prince, like email scams. Like, I mean, I did it like 20 years ago, but like, how
Mhm.
are you still falling for it? Then they see like Trump come along, and like you get the emails saying, "Donate now to Victory Legal Fund." 1,000 times matching and all that. And I'm like, legal fund, like it's going to go to Trump's legal bills, not to like this recount. Like they're not spending any money on it. There's Trump's a billionaire. If he wanted to do a recount in all 50 states, he just write a
Yeah, he
check.
would
Like,
just, unless he's not a billionaire and it's all debt and IOUs and super
but
leveraged properties.
okay, let's say it's $3 million a state. He can get $150 million line of credit. Like I'm sure he
Oh
could,
yeah, just on his name alone, sure.
if he really, really wanted to, or Sheldon Adelson or somebody. Like, there's people out there that could bankroll this stuff, but like they're not doing it. Like in Georgia, like the two senators, that are running in the runoff came and they're like, the corrupt, elections commissioner should resign. And the guy's like a Republican, and he's just like, yo, like he had a press conference. He's like, hey, I'm MAGA. Like, you know, I'm a Republican. Look at my social media. Like, I don't know what you guys are saying that like this is all Democrat controlled. Like Georgia,
Right.
you know, is largely Republican controlled for a lot of that stuff. And you know, there are some local instances where it's Democrat controlled, but it's it's just ridiculous. Like this is just this weird show thing where they've got these two seats that Trump doesn't care about. Like, this is a funny thing. People are like, well, what if he's like trying to do this or that for those seats? Like, yo, Trump doesn't care at all.
Oh yeah,
Mitch
Trump doesn't
McConnell
care.
does. Like, if Mitch is playing along with it, it's because he sees a point. Like, he finds an angle here where he's like, well, obviously we can't piss off all these Trump lunatics right now because we need them to show up on January. And if that means I have to pretend that Trump's got a chance and we'll back him to the end and all that, then okay, we'll do that.
And so be it, right?
And so be it. And you know, for Mitch, like you can see his angle. Like he doesn't care. He just wants to win again because he likes being, in charge of the Senate. But as far as like Trump caring about Georgia, he doesn't. Like, Trump was going after Mitt Romney before he got impeached. I'm like, yo, like
That's true.
Mitt's one of the votes that could put you away. Like, not just out of office, but in theory, put you in jail. Like, how many of these people do you really think you can mess with before like that becomes a problem for you? So, like, I don't think that Trump cares at all about like this Georgia Senate race. I don't, and honestly, I don't even know how any of this is playing out. I feel like it's totally unpredictable. They were saying it's like the exit polls were like 48 to 48 as far as like, hey, should the Georgia Senate be Republican or Democrat? Like,
Yeah.
during the last election. So like, this is a total wild card going into January. It could go either way.
And
But like,
both of the seats are open too, which is unheard of.
I don't know. It's just another weird ending to 2020 where you have a state that, oh, this is the other thing. They think that they're like, going to flip, they're going to do these, investigations and flip these states. It's like Florida, 2,530 odd votes. Like right now in Georgia, your nearest state, it's like 1,100 votes. Like, or I'm sorry, 11,000 votes.
Yeah.
Like, you're not anywhere in the ballpark of being able to overturn that election. Like, it's not even remotely close. And then they're like, oh, and then Pennsylvania, 40, 50,000, votes.
Yeah.
Like all of these states that they're talking about are so far outside the margin of anything that's going to change. Like people who look at this professionally are like, there's no game here. There's nothing. Like you can't. No court's going to go for this. Like even your, rinky dink, like recently appointed judges. You need to give them some kind of law to hang their hat on if they're going to, pass it along. And even the Supreme Court, which he thinks is in his pocket, the Supreme Court is not going to hand him something for free. Like if he shows up, like with Gore and Bush in 2000,
Hmm.
okay, they kind of tilted it to him, but they had a leg to stand on. Like they actually had. It was stupid, but it was defensible. But like this is way outside the bounds of that, and like every even though even on the Republican side, like the serious people that used to be like solid Republicans are looking at it, looking for any kind of angle. Nobody sees it. Like it's just they're just going through the motions because most people have the understanding of law that they do from watching Law and Order. Like that's all they understand. Like they're watching it like it's a TV drama because Trump's pretending it's TV drama, but it's not going to break for the hero because there's nothing at the end of this rainbow. Like it's just make believe.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's a done deal. But the Georgia race to me is very interesting.
Yeah.
So everybody in Georgia gets 2 votes, basically, one for each race. And so I'm wondering how many people are going to split because people want I like having a balanced ticket or whatever. Because there was some of that happened in the election where people voted against Trump but voted for the Republican that was running in their district, or the Republicans running in their districts. So I'm curious how that might turn out. There's no indication whatsoever from everything I read that there's say one way or the other, but that's to me is a very interesting thing to look. So Biden's more than likely going to have a divided Senate regardless of how those 2 races go. Let's just assume that it goes 1-1. Republicans pick up 1, Democrats pick up 1. So that would give Biden 49, Democrats, Republicans 51.
Making
51
Mitt Romney
senators.
the most powerful man in America.
Making Mitt Romney one of, yes, for sure. Um, and that would ensure that Mitch McConnell still retains the majority leader. So, what do we think Biden is going to be able to accomplish, if anything, outside of the slew of executive orders that he said he's going to pass within the first 2 days?
Well, you're going to have not just Mitt Romney, but Collins, and let's say another three or four odd, moderate Republicans, kind of like another gang of six, who
Right.
could basically run the Senate. Like on one hand, yes, Mitch will be incredibly powerful in his own way, uh, but Mitch is also not willing to negotiate, which means he doesn't really have any power in a lot of ways. So you have the power to say no when you have everybody on board, but Biden's not Obama in that if you look at him from an ideological and policy standpoint, he's not black. So there's going to be a
It's true.
increased amount of pressure on these Republicans who are living in districts that do want things. They want stimulus. They're going to want certain things that are uh, you know even infrastructure, which will probably just naturally flow easier. Um, and Mitch McConnell might not want to do anything, but this is where you have internal politics within the Senate where a lot of these people don't owe their power to Mitch McConnell, so they have power bases independent of him, and they can now leverage the Democratic majority or minority, which is razor thin. It's one thing if it's like a 50 or if it's a 40-60 split, where if you
Yeah.
got like one or two guys who are willing to play ball, it doesn't matter. When it's razor thin, then suddenly those deciding votes own the Senate. So
Oh yeah,
it's
for
kind
sure.
of it's a terrible situation for Mitch unless he wins both seats, and even then, it's not great because you can still get a couple guys who go against you. But if it's just like one where it's like 50-50 split, and then Harris is a deciding vote, that's a tough place to be in because suddenly you start losing a lot. I don't know. I think we'll get a stimulus right off the bat. I think that we'll get
Yeah, I think I can see stimulus. I could see a couple of clean bills coming out for that, um, because
yeah,
Biden
there won't be any.
might capitulate a little bit on the ask.
Oh, he totally will, and that's honestly at that point, anything is better than nothing. I mean, stimulus is a stimulus, and that's great. As long as we can get money flowing, then it'll be desperately needed. Uh, there's going to be a lot of stuff where the government has actually ceded so much power to the presidency to just run things by executive order that Biden can do quite a bit or threaten to do quite a bit if he doesn't get his way. Like, what if Biden's like, hey, like I want this, or I'm going to knock down the wall. Like, you guys love this wall that Trump built you,
True.
so how about we get an infrastructure bill through, or I put some bulldozers to work somewhere else. There I don't know if Biden has any balls. Like, people tend to talk big a certain way, and then you get into
Yeah.
the Oval Office, and then you never know what somebody's made of. And you saw this in the military. Some people, talk big, and then they get promoted a couple times, and you're like, oh, now that like you have responsibility, you're a total wimp.
Yeah.
So
No follow through whatsoever.
no follow through. Yeah. So and maybe Biden had follow through once. Maybe he still does. Maybe he doesn't. We're just not going to see it. Like we actually don't know what we got with this guy. And with Trump, I mean, he's just a space cadet. So like he had a ton of power and he didn't really use much of it. Like when you get down to it, when he controlled basically the whole Congress, what did they get done but like tax cuts? Like
Yeah.
they
Nothing.
didn't they didn't get anything done. So and then he spent the rest of the time just flailing, with executive orders and all that, and not even really well done ones. I mean, they had some things here and there, but most of what Trump did was just not doing much of anything. Just going to golf and causing controversy online. But there's a vast ocean of things that you can do just by changing personnel. By
Oh yeah.
changing up the type of people who run these government agencies and how the staffing is done, dramatically changes the entire government. I mean, it changes the outcomes. It changes, as far as foreign policy. Uh, there, it's hard to overstate how much an impact just changing the people out, because the people who are running the U.S. government right now are like the third and fourth stringers who will know they'll never work again.
And they're
And
not even like they're not lifers. Like they're political appointees. They are at times acting.
Peter Navarro, who's Trump's advisor on like China and trade and all that, Um, Jared Kushner found him because they needed a China expert. So he went onto Amazon and he started browsing books and he
Oh my
saw that that one
god.
had some reviews. So they reached out to this guy and the guy has like no like credentials to speak of, other than I think he may have like uh I think he may have taught at some small college in
Yeah, I
like the
think
West Coast
that's
or something, but like just basically never worked in government per se and just kind of like a weird loose cannon on China. And he's now like one of Trump's like top guys who follows him around and like he's a nobody. Like the guy just, just picked out of a hat because they didn't have anybody. And that's most of the US government right now, which is why nothing is really getting done anywhere other than on Trump's Twitter feed or him like shaking hands with Kim Jong Un and us calling that a summit. So at some
those
point we'll go
coins are
back.
lit though.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Might buy one.
So I think that that's what we'll expect out of Biden in the first 100 days will be like some really, really, really well done executive orders that, and then vast amount of staffing changes that will basically reset the U.S. government to be full of adults again that just are running things competently. And even if they're not setting the world on fire with the kind of reform I like to see, at least we'll be back to like a functioning major world government that isn't a joke. Like right now we're just a joke. I mean and that's weirdly what a lot of Trump people want. Like they wanted to tear down the system, they want to drain the swamp, but really they just it's just this weird nihilistic like lashing out and they just they're unhappy so they want everything to be broken kind of a thing. And it's like, okay, well we did that for 4 years, are we good now? Like can we go back to running things competently again? And
Flailing
a
at
lot of
like
them are,
my change.
yeah, I mean a lot of them are not good, like they're I guess still ready for everything to be on fire. But I don't know, I mean it's like we gave that a try and tax cuts for the rich, okay. We did a little bit of prison reform, and
Yeah,
I'll give
it
Trump
was
his
good.
credit. Yeah, that was. I mean, it was a step in the right direction, and good on the Kim Kardashian for pulling the wool over his eyes on that.
Good on Cory Booker and Rand Paul for trying to get it through the Senate for the last 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some small victories here and there that really were just stuff that got foisted on Trump, and he kind of fell for it, and that's good. But yeah, beyond that, as far as Biden's first 100 days, I think it's going to be a lot of just like a weird reset of the system, and if it does nothing else, then lets people get this weird animosity out of their system where we're like owning the libs is like the only function of government. And like right now, you can see that it's not the fever hasn't broken. Like a lot of the people on the right don't accept that Trump lost. They think that everything's going to be fine, and it just hasn't sit in yet. But at some point, it's going to get real for them, and they're going to freak out. And rightly or wrongly, Biden is going to try to calm everything down, and he's not going to scold them or tell them have a come to Jesus. He's just going to try and smooth it all over, and just hopefully we can all get along, and it'll be okay. And unfortunately, you really can't you can't extend your arm to somebody who just wants to nod off. Like they don't really want
Yeah.
peace, so it's silly to try to make peace with them. But Biden's going to try anyway, and in a weird sense, that's admirable. So I
Well, and
guess
it's
we'll give
also
it.
necessary since we don't have we Democrats don't have 60 votes in the Senate to break a filibuster. So
Yeah, but again, that gets back to like you could pick off a handful of states and their senators and be like, "Hey, Maine, hey, Utah, do you guys want to get some great pork barrel projects? Let's
oh
talk
yeah,
to
I
your,
mean there's
let's
some
let's make a
arm
deal."
twisting that can happen, but nine people, I don't know.
Hmm. Well, it won't be 9, but we
Yeah,
get 1 or 2.
but we
Um,
can definitely get some things passed if it makes it to the floor. Some
yeah,
things that can get passed. That my concern is it making it to the floor in the first place. As far as Biden like resetting the government, one of the ones that I'm most interested in is not any of the major ones that presidents usually get credit for, like state or secretary of defense, maybe even SAC or Treasury. It's education. I'm
mhm.
very curious where the new direction of the Department of Education is going to be after DeVos is rightfully finally booted from that position.
From from what I've heard, I've seen a couple of lists floated around. It seems the most likely is going to be the former secretary or the former um, president of the teachers union of the U.S.
Okay.
Teachers Union. So I forget exactly how that position is described, but it's basically the former leader of the, teachers union. So I'm sure they have
I'm
some
gonna see if
national
I can find that
organization.
really quick.
Um, but
Debate.
it's basically, everything that Biden's cabinet has shaped up to be is, it's very establishment. I mean,
Oh yeah.
on one hand, it's very comforting because it's like everybody who's lined up there is just like super qualified, super competent, and all that. I think that that's kind of the long term danger is like you try to go back to these establishment solutions, it didn't really work, and you prompt things like Trump to happen because what these people are doing isn't working, and even though they're smart and mean well, like we just need reform, we need advances. Like they're trying to do things the old way because that's comforting even to Democrats, like the people who have establishment power and they don't like giving power up and they don't like change. So there are forces that resist change, and then you get people like Trump who's like, well, if we can't have change, we'll have flame and we'll burn everything down. So at some point, we need to just get past either torching everything or, you know, ossifying everything into dinosaur bones. And we need to actually try and move forward. But apparently that was not on the ticket at all for this year. It was either, it was some version of the past, either the sensible past or the make believe past.
That is status quo Joe or nostalgia Donald.
Yeah. Oh man, that's good. But that's exactly it. It's like this weird, fake, hazy nostalgia, or like basically, good old status quo Joe. Joe's been here for damn near half century and never had a real job, and
if
he's still kicking.
if Leave It to Beaver's dad was an asshole.
Yeah, I don't even know. Other than we've got a little bit of drama for the next 2 months, which is it's so stupid and counterproductive, especially like if you figure it in 4 years, like if Trump doesn't go away and just has Trump TV and we're stuck with him like tweeting and broadcasting and just being Trump for the next 4 years and then running again in 4 years, Biden's not going to be here. It'll be President Harris. Um,
Yeah.
but in theory, everything will be going pretty well. Like you will have, we'll have several vaccines by that point. The COVID thing will have passed. The economy will be doing great, and we're not going to have, the kind of fight Trump wants. Like he's going to be an old man by then. Like 4 years on top of where he's at now. He's severely overweight. He stumbles when he walks.
Oh
He
yeah.
babbles. He mumbles. They make fun of Biden, but Trump talks the same way, and he's much younger. Like they just kind of give him a pass because we're used to him being a babbling idiot. But he's not going to age well. He's not aging well now, and at least Biden, cuts a dashing figure. He's spry. He still runs. You know,
And people like act like
eh,
Biden was like, but there's probably some diminished capacity. I mean,
sure.
he's not as fast as he once was,
Nope.
but he's always stumbled over his words because he has a stutter. So anybody
Yeah.
that's trying to say that's dementia is an
And
idiot.
and let's say that it's true. I mean, let's just say, okay, hey, Joe's slow. Joe, he's slowed down. He's just not as sharp as he used to be. Time has taken its toll. Okay, he's also relatively healthy, all things considered. You know, Trump has, you know, I don't know. Like I'd look at the guy and I'm like, you don't look like you got much longer in you. Like Biden is merely an old guy who looks pretty fit, but he's just
Yeah.
old. Whereas Trump, you're just like, man, like even his hair. Like think about what that's going to look like in 4 years. Like think about you know, what any part of his body is going to look like. I mean, it's just from the legs and his weird haunchy you know stance where he stumbles around and all that. I think he's too vain and just not really up to it. And in 4 years, it'll be a disaster. And it just, I don't see it. I think that he's got this weird window right now where he pulls some last rabbit out of the hat. That it's just not happening. I mean, this is just this Hollywood kind of ending that he's trying to pretend is going to happen, but it's just not there. Like he's just
No,
gonna
no, no.
get out, and then we're gonna have to listen to him, just tweet from his deathbed.
He's he's
I mean,
he's gonna touch his son on the shoulder and be like, "Oh, your time, son. Can I really do it,
yeah,
Pappy? Am I a real boy?" No, Don Jr., not
I,
you.
right? Yeah, yeah. He's gonna wait for Barron. That'd be the best. Um, yeah, the whole Don Jr. thing cracks me up too because like his former girlfriend says that like he's got a substance abuse problem.
I mean,
Uh,
it
I'm not
kind of
making
looks
any
like it.
judgments here, but the guy, you know, he
Not that I care. I don't care.
looks like he enjoys cocaine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you got that level of job and you're like trying to make fun of people for having substance abuse issues, maybe have a little bit of humility. Maybe maybe own it a bit. And George Bush did. He had DUI, and he's quit drinking. He owned up to a lot of that stuff, and you
Born
kind of have to
again.
born again. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh gosh, born again Don Jr. Can you imagine? Just
Oh, I mean,
holding the Bible up there. And,
he would win the Republican nomination hands easily.
oh
It'd
yeah,
be
no,
handedly if oh
yeah,
man, we just put it out there. I'm
right.
sorry,
For,
universe. It's
yeah.
our fault.
Fortunately, he's far too stupid to do that, and even as a hustle, like even Trump, like the guy never bothered to even pretend to learn anything about the Bible, even to the
Nope.
extent that like your average politician does just to fake it. Like they just don't care enough to fake it. Like they want to just say words and just you're expected to believe them. So, but by God, we're like Don Jr. to actually put in the effort to be like a tell
Televangelist? Are
televangelist.
you saying
Yeah,
you want him on TV like preaching or
yeah. Like if he were
okay?
to go that route, he'd be unstoppable. Like we
Yeah,
would be stuck with like 30 years of that guy's president. Like it
yeah.
would
It
just
would
be it would be some
American
dystopian.
fascism. Here we come.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'd be like, well, I'm gonna escape to Mexico or Canada like before any of this kicks off. Like you guys have fun with it. So there ain't no stopping that.
Yeah, dude.
But fortunately, these guys, that's the beauty of fascism, is that these guys are inherently incompetent. So they're always the authors of their own doom. So just like with Trump and COVID, I mean, Trump destroyed himself. He would have won this election easily had he not
Yeah,
from himself. And
yeah.
same
And
thing with,
if he would have just twisted McConnell's arm a little bit more and got like stimulus relief.
but he can't because that's the whole point, is that Trump can't be made to do anything because he's the boss and he decides how it goes and he says what's what. So like the idea that outside events could force him to do something, you know, I'm not even going to make the uh, Molotov Ribbentrop joke that I want to, but let's just say that the Russians have made the mistake of teaming up with fascists before, thinking that it would work out well for them in the end. And I don't know. I think that these guys always find a way to self-destruct and bring everyone else down with them. Like people were talking about how, hey, there's going to be any election interference this year, ha ha ha. Like, yeah, it's because Putin doesn't want any part of this. Like,
He got what he wanted out of this
he
deal.
got what he wanted. Discord has been set. Like at this
Yep.
point, he wants to stay as far away from this as possible. He learned before that you don't get too close to these guys. Like you just set them up and then you just back away. Like there's no point in standing anywhere near Trump because he's going to take himself down and everyone in his orbit down with him who's not already in jail. Like this is what I don't understand. How
Yeah.
do people keep working for him? Everyone that has worked for him
How is
before went to jail.
how is Giuliani not in jail yet? I
Oh,
don't
but
understand. We were both wrong.
yeah, I don't think we'll be wrong for much longer. I think that them winning the election was their way out, and
Oh.
once there's suddenly no longer a top cover, it's going to be different. Like they got Bill Barr running interference for him now, but they're not going to have that very shortly.
Do you think that's going to be one of those things? Like if Biden's AG does end up going after them, do you think that will be bad for the country though?
Nope, I think that
It'd be good.
because this is what we do in America. Nobody goes after the big guy. You just take out all the people underneath. So
So
like,
it'll be like the Iran Contra thing all over again, where all the
yeah,
lower end people go. Okay, I gotcha.
yeah, Trump isn't going to go to jail, even though you could probably make once you get your hands on his taxes and take a look at things. There's probably plenty of stuff in there that's not above board. But the question will be not like the Giuliani's, like all of those weird henchmen types. Those guys are all screwed. Like they're all going to go to jail, and that they didn't go now is just a function of the DOJ at the top level, not the mid or bottom levels, but just
Hmm.
the management's corrupt because they all work
Yeah.
for Trump. Once you have reasonably competent people in there who are not totally corrupted, and you're just an honest perusal of it, I mean, Giuliani is probably going to die in prison. And then you have several other people in Trump's orbit who are in trouble. And weirdly, the question there is, do any of Trump's kids get into trouble?
Yeah,
And
that's
that
a big
will,
question.
yeah, because there's plenty of stuff that they've done as sort of private citizens, but also sort of government officials, where we're supposed to pretend that it's okay because, well, it's Trump and there is kids and he loves his family and all that. But it's like, but that's not how government works. That's not how the law works. Like, you can't actually do any of this stuff.
Yeah,
And the
multiple hatch
idea,
violations.
yeah, and I think that it'll be pretty obvious to show how they've been making money off of like what they accuse Hunter Biden of. Like, I think that was just a lot of framing for them to say that, well, you didn't go after Hunter for this
Yeah, no,
stuff
it
that
was
we made
totally
up.
projection and deflection.
That's all. But I think that when you get down to it, they're going to get those kids, and they're not going to get. And I think that because the establishment is going to be okay with going after Trump in a way that they're not okay with, like the Bushes or the Clintons or the Reagans or anybody from the top tier. It's just kind of how Washington operates. Is that you don't want to create a context where the top people could be punished, because that's a never-ending loop. Like,
Oh yeah,
you, it's just,
it would
it
just
would
be
be
tit for
nice.
tat the whole time.
It would never end. Whereas with Trump, but that's to preserve the system. Whereas Trump
Yes.
is like a threat to the system. So I weirdly think that the system would tolerate taking out, like, that type of, criminal element, because it's a different type of threat. Like, it's not like, oh, hey, you probably shouldn't have bombed Cambodia. Like, that's kind of a war crime. Like, that sort of thing where it's like, well, yes, but that's a gray area where some future president may need to do that. It might be a good idea. We don't want them worrying about going to jail. So weirdly, we've just decided that we're just not going to do that as a society, and it's worked out well for us because it preserves the system. But I don't think Trump preserves the system, so I think the
No,
system doesn't want to preserve him. So I think that
for sure.
he actually, if of any president that could ever go to jail in our lifetime or the one before or after, it would be him, because he's a very special and different case. And but most likely it'll be all of his flunkies and a good deal of his fortune. They'll probably get, New York will eventually lay their claws into his properties, and the state will make him difficult to do business with, and that won't end well for him.
Yeah, I don't like. I 100% agree with you on that. The institutional protection that normally is afforded to the characters because of Trump's inherent corrupting presence to it all, I don't think it's gonna protect him. Um, One of the things that I'm interested in to talk about for our final little conversation is the seeming, because we don't know yet. Everybody, if you're tuning in, um, exit polling right now is crap because there was way too many mail-in ballots. You can't exit poll a mail-in ballot, so we're gonna have to wait for everything to be adjusted to find out demographics and how many people actually split their vote, their tickets, and what the reasons behind that were and everything else. But I am curious about the seeming splitting of the ticket, where while Trump, and by extension, to a degree, Trumpism was rejected, uh, not as much as we all hope, but substantially, Republicanism and conservatism was not. So, what do you think that Trump has had a stamp on conservatism and people want that version, or do you think it was, we'll let Joe Biden get in, but we're really afraid of the socialist, so we're going to have a buttress against that by voting in Republicans in lower levels of government?
I think all of that is true. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of Republicans that are totally down with Trump. Like, as far as policy wise,
Mm-hmm.
they probably love that guy more than Reagan when you get down to politics, like,
Oh wow,
policies. Um, but Reagan was an actor, and he knew, like, kind of what the role was, and Trump doesn't. Like, Trump is just being Trump as president. Reagan was, I'm the president. I'm Ronald Reagan playing the president.
right,
Whereas, Trump is like, I am the president, Donald Trump, and I'm going to be Donald Trump. And I also, apparently have this other house that comes with it, which is shabby. My house in Florida is much better. My house in New York is the tallest building that was ever built by human hands. So, like, it's different. But yeah, you got a lot of people who are totally okay. And I associate with a lot of Republicans in my day to day,
right.
and I hear a very, very, very common refrain is, "Oh yeah, Trump, total dirtbag. Hate the guy. Guy's awful. Love his policies. Like, guy's great for the economy, great for taxes, great for business. Love him."
So
But the guy himself, he's a disaster. He's a piece of shit, and I wouldn't let him near my kids or anything like it. I hate him. So
not
to answer your question, yes.
yeah.
What?
Not meaning to cut you off, but I'm really curious about the Love His policies because Republicans for the last 40 years, or at least say since Reagan, have really been pro free trade. And Trump, in his rhetoric and partly in his actions with trying to renegotiate some of these trade deals, has not been. There was protectionism attempted, not anything too robust to go after China. Um, there was, wanting to push more Buy America and violate in a way that would violate the World Trade Organization's policies and that sort of thing. And run of the mill Republicans that I've dealt with in my day to day, Midwest, East Coast, South, because I've been all over the place, has that's not been a thing that they've been as supportive of. So do you think that's something that's changed recently, or do you think this is great power struggle, so we have to take it to China, but everybody else can trade with us?
I think that the 95% of Americans don't have any opinion on trade whatsoever because it doesn't affect them in any tangible way that they understand.
Okay.
So, like when I say like policies, like they'll, for instance, with Trump, and I'll say like, hey, we're just talking, the name Trump will come up, and the Republicans will often mention, hey, that guy, total dirtbag, can't stand him, love his
Hmm.
policies, and if you poke them on that, they'll talk about trade, they'll talk about Supreme Court justices, abortion, uh, less regulation for business. That they're thinking in terms of like either bread and butter, business issues that affect, what they see as their bottom line, their 401ks, their investments, or the more intangible things like, like abortion or guns or whatever,
Right.
where they see Trump as like a staunch defender of these things that they really care about. However, they think he's a dirtbag and they don't like him, and they're embarrassed about him. Like, there's a lot of people who are Republicans who, you know, like these are especially the women. We can talk about the women in a minute, but there are people who do like what he's doing. They just wish that he wasn't a psychopath and that he like could constrain himself and act like a grown up. But that's where they're torn. Is that there are a lot of Republicans that love the act and they love the stupid WWE kind of aspect of Trump, but
Yeah, he has balls, right?
yeah, but a lot of them don't. Like a lot of them, and I think this is kind of what probably ruined him in the end, is that he could have done much better if he just had a little bit of constraint. But that gets to the women, and you talk about like the polling errors, and like wow, gosh, the polls from before the election, and after the election were off. The more and more we're looking at it, the more it seems like the polls were actually not off, with the exception of one demographic, which is white women. So
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe. Anyways, like I said, exit polling shit right now. We'll have to wait.
it,
So
it is. And I'm sure it's true to extent for white men as well. But I think that it's largely because of exactly what I just said. You have people who've decided that they like his policies, but they don't want to stand by him in public. So they're not going to tell a pollster the truth.
yeah,
They're not going to defend him in public, but privately behind closed doors, they'll be like, well, you know what? The guy lowered our business taxes and, he's fighting to save unborn babies. And, my husband keeps his bump stock on his rifle. And that's what George Washington and Jesus wanted. So, we should just probably give him a chance. And I wish he didn't have a potty mouth. But gosh, it's either that or we let the Marxists take over and they'll turn us into Venezuela, and nobody wants that. So it's too bad. He's such a mean guy and just a bad man. But we're gonna vote for him anyway. I think that especially just to broadly generalize, there's a weird kind of a douche bro mentality where guys are
mhm.
like, yeah, like f your feelings. Oh, I don't care. Whereas a lot of times in our society, women tend to be a little bit more concerned about what other people think about them, and they're going to be less likely to fess up to their true political beliefs. And I feel like that's where the blind spot came in for the polling, is that Trump is uniquely bad, and large amount of people are uniquely, or I should say, constitutionally inclined to lie on such matters.
Yeah, there was as far as the women voting for Trump, there was a Turning Points USA ad about that, and I'm trying to bring it up because I would like to play it. Um, It was like our little secret,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the ad is. I found the ad to be effective
Yeah.
in what it was trying to convey, even though it
Mhm.
was all, it was bullshit. But who cares? Marketing is about convincing people that you're right, and if it's effective, who cares if it's lies, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think
Good
that
marketing.
does
Like,
definitely play a role there. Um,
so I forget exactly what you asked.
oh, I was wondering, did so we kind of covered Republicans not liking Trump but liking his policies, but do we think Trump actually left a mark and changed conservatism, or not? And yeah, I think that was it.
Sort of. Like I think that I weirdly think that Trump got changed more than he changed anything. Like there's one part if you think about early Trump, like he used to say stuff like, "Gosh, like he goes, I'm going to go in and fix everything. Like when I'm get in there, like everyone's going to have health care. You can't have people not have health care."
Yeah.
And then like the guys pulled him aside and they whispered it in his ear. He's like, "Oh, okay, I guess we're not doing that." And then there was a shooting somewhere in the East Coast, and he's like, he goes, "You know what?" He goes, "The cops are being like too weak. Like I think you just go in there. They got the guns. You just take the guns. Like we'll go to court later, but you go in and take the guns." And the NRA pulled him aside. He's like, "We're not doing that." So he's like, "Oh yeah, we're not doing that." And after 4 years in office, rather than Trump remaking conservatism, conservatism just remade Trump. And now he is like he's the swamp that he went in there to change. If you even give him credit for wanting to do that in the first place,
Right.
now he's just he's basically like mirror universe Mitt Romney, like like in Star Trek where they go to that alternate
Right.
dimension,
Right.
yelling goatees and all that. Like that's all. Like he's just like this evil version of Mitt Romney who's just has the exact same policies as Mitt, but is just a dick about it. So
Hmm,
I think that
good
Trump
point.
was changed, and he's become just your you know kind of a paint by numbers conservative, where it didn't have to be that way. Like he actually had the social and political capital to go in and say, "Oh, you know what? So from now
Payout.
on, conservatism is us getting paid. So like, we're going to make sure that everybody gets government health care because the corporations are ripping us off. You're not
Yeah,
going to
it
rip
could
us
have been
off
a real
anymore."
populist.
Oh, absolutely. And and he would have won. He would have been FDR. Mirror universe FDR, where he would have showed up with a goatee in the wheelchair and taken over. Like he would have been truly unstoppable if he had decided to become like a left wing economic populist with a hardcore right wing nationalist, like
Social
patriotic,
bent. Yeah.
that kind of hardcore vibe on one end, but also like, and I'm also gonna pay you guys off on the other. But in the
Yeah.
end, it was just a scam. Like he went in there to lower his own taxes, and he lowered his taxes, and then he just said some words on topics he doesn't care about. He doesn't care if you rubes have guns. Like he doesn't care if there's abortions or not. If he if he wants Melania or anybody in his family to get an abortion, they'll get one. Like
Oh
they
yeah.
got plenty of money. Like nothing that he does is going to affect him ever. He doesn't care. None of this registers with him on any level. Like this is all just LARPing, just to keep you guys on board so he can lower his taxes. So, and you let him lower his taxes, he's now totally happy. Um,
Yeah, that's true. I do think that over the last, and I don't know if this is Trump's rhetoric or not. It could be something that's been brewing in the Republican circles for a while. But over the last 4 years with Trump, I've seen Republicans care a little bit less about civil liberty, like rank and file. With the
well,
whole Judge Dredd uh, praising the police and the whole Punisher mythos of police in Blue Line, anti Black Lives Matter, like that's always been there because racism. But the other things like, well, who should have just followed directions, and they say that about an innocent white person that gets killed too. So
yeah. So, like, there's a weird kind of an area where for a while, in your political lifetime, people were embarrassed by George Bush, so they stopped calling themselves conservatives. They called themselves libertarians, and that
yeah,
was just like this
yeah,
retreat where they backed away and they pretended to believe some things, but in reality, those people were never really libertarians. And then the idea of like restraining police at most was like, at the very most, was like, well, the cops should be more restrained with white people. But like that's like even that's credit. Like in most cases with normal like by the book conservatism, like the kind of the worship of the police and military to keep order is paramount. and that's what makes them conservative. Like that's one of the things is that you believe that the authorities are righteously acting to protect everyone, and cops are there to just blow away bad guys, and that's the point.
Hey, Dirty
And
Harry.
yeah, very. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But like this has been the you know really the underlying like core belief of conservatism, for a very long time, is the use of righteous power to uh, basically use violence to wipe away problems. So that is central to conservative beliefs. It was only pretended to not be that because there was this period where it was just inconvenient to be conservative because George Bush ruined everything, and it was just shameful. So people just ran away and
Right.
hid. But that sentiment never went away. And back under Obama and under Trump, like these lives matter kind of a thing where um, you know that disregard for civil liberties and civil rights, that's always been part of conservatism. It just they had a weird patch where they pretended. It's like right now they're pretending that they love Trump because he's anti-war. No new wars in the Middle East.
It's a
Man,
lie too,
you
but
guys are nobody. Like you guys couldn't give a shit less about that. Like this is just like you realize it's convenient to point this out because Trump has not bothered to start any new wars because he's lazy. But that's not like some moral like righteousness on his part. He just doesn't care to mess with those people because he'd rather own the libs at home because he realizes correctly that nobody cares other than defense contractors about a lot of these overseas operations. So, like for Trump, it's almost like he just stumbled into a useful kind of an adaptation where he just, you know, I mean, he certainly is aggressive with the droning and all that overseas, and he pretends otherwise. But um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that that's a thing. I think that they're just reverting to what they've always wanted, and Trump is in a weird way a reflection of what they've always wanted.
yeah, I could see that to an extent as well. I've always been politically aware, but I haven't always been politically engaged. That makes sense, like talking to things like that. So if that was what happened during the Bush years with people just pretending to want civil liberties, then I'll take your word for it.
I only know that because I'm old and I lived through it, so it was a
Right.
thing. And I'll fess up. I voted for Bush, and then Bush embarrassed me, and I became a libertarian. So I guess the difference being is that I genuinely did, I think, evolve, and it occurred to me that most people's evolution was just like a temporary thing. Have people like Ben Shapiro who are like the tail end of that. Like he's not a libertarian. He just likes the idea of being outside the system so he can
Yeah.
be above the fray and all that. And that's a lot of what people did is that they didn't want to own their support of Bush. So yeah, and I know I've ruined it for all of my fans now who realize that I voted for Bush. But it's
I
true.
mean, they knew.
So yeah, yeah,
Some
you
of them,
guys knew.
anyways. But
Bush
yeah,
was the last great Republican. No, I'm done. I can't, I'm not even playing. I can't. I can't do that. But yeah.
I did notice some of this in during the Tea Party rise of Obama, where people were claiming to be libertarians and trying to get
Right.
libertarians back into the Tea Party and things like that. And I'm like, guys, don't really care about any of this. You're lying. Because I attended because me being me like you, I attended some libertarian meetups in 2008 after voting for Obama because
Mhm.
I thought, hey, maybe libertarians will try to take over the Republican Party. Boy, was I wrong, and that found
Mhm.
that out very quickly. Just
Well,
like go ahead.
I was gonna say, in a weird sense, in some ways, they did in that kind of like low taxes, no minimum wage, no regulation. Like there's a lot of libertarian beliefs that if you strip away the like also, hey, open borders,
Right. Well, that's just
defund the
social
police.
Darwinism, then, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on what kind of libertarian you're talking about. But if you mean like the Rand Paul or Ron Paul, Mises.org kind of a thing,
Mhm.
the ANCAP philosophy. Yeah, I mean, that's basically just social Darwinism. Kind of a dog eat dog thing that is, not good for anybody. But in a certain sense, if you're thinking about it, like it's either that or this oppressive over government that controls all, and you're slaves to the system and audit the Fed and whatever. Like they kind of sell it to you as this, like, well. it's better that that these these strong men stand alone, and survive on your own merit and all that, versus being you know beholden to this system where you'll never truly be free. And it's this really kind of a dark worldview when you get down to it,
No,
where
it is.
you even kind of you understand that it's a dark worldview, but you just think that the alternative is so much worse. That and you see that in how the Democrats are portrayed now as like this like all controlling nanny state that wants to dominate every aspect of your lives and persecute you for thought crime and all that. And they're like they basically sell it as a, well, this is the alternative, is that we shrink the government down, and everyone just lives on their own merits and whatnot. And it's you
Every
know
man's a
it,
king, otherwise every man's a slave.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, if that's the alternative, it's like, well, I guess I'll take my chances of being a king.
Yeah.
And it's it's not a great sales pitch, but ultimately it doesn't have to be that good. It just has to pull in a certain percentage of people. And I don't know. I think there was some interesting lessons to be learned from it, but it's ultimately not true. And the more you look at it and kind of look at the alternatives, you're like, oh, this is actually kind of a scam, huh? Like, this is just to get people to argue for lower taxes for rich people, with the idea that maybe one day I'll be rich and like I'll be Jeff Bezos, like haha, forcing my wage slaves to work till they drop in these stuffy factories and all that. So like that's really the all the dream that they've got to sell you. It's not really about liberty. Like when you get to the whole like, hey,
Yeah.
how about open borders? How about drug legalization? How about defunding the police? Suddenly they're like, whoa, hold on, easy there,
Well, if
commie.
we
It's
defund
like,
the police, who would protect my mansion? You
right,
expect moi to pay for security?
which ultimately they would. I mean, when you get
I
down
mean,
to
they
it,
would, yes, but
yeah. So that's what's so funny is that like the whole idea of like defunding the police is actually they don't really care. Like from the larger standpoint, that's something for more of like the rubes, because the idea of most people, when they I say most people, the idea of classic American white society is the police is like this extension of the old slave patrols, where you're just keeping those people in check. And that's the whole idea. That's why people are really so worried about it. I mean, we could have
yeah.
like just local security, just handle like little disputes and all that. And even when people were laughing about having like social workers as part of cops,
Mm-hmm.
if you actually know what cops do on the day to day, yeah, you can replace half of cops with
Fuck
social
all.
workers. Like oh, I mean, or practically all. Like the idea that people laugh at that, they're only laughing at it because what they envision police to be is people to like put the foot down
Yeah.
on people who are more tan than I am. Like that.
Yeah.
That's the point. Like
They
they
think.
laugh at social.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they laugh at social workers because they don't want social work done. Like they
Yeah.
just want you to like have these people like kicked in the head with a boot. Like
Exactly.
that's why they pay for police.
And
So
and they
that's what
they
that's what conservatism is. And that's unfortunately libertarianism in the right leaning American sense is often perverted into that as well. And
yeah
it's tragic.
they tend to look at policing as being uh action oriented
Mhm.
and preventive rather than reactive, and just hounding people down for cash. That's what it
Yeah.
boils down to on the day to day. Speeding
Just fundraising.
tickets, yeah,
Yeah.
speeding tickets, jaywalking, any of those kind of like civil fines that police officers are often told to go make quota on. It's just harassing people for tax money.
Or like the homeless. Like
Yeah.
so I get this at like I go to local city events here, and people will get fired up at the police like, we've got homeless all over the place and you don't do anything about it. Like what what are the cops supposed to do? Like the cops don't have houses. Like how are they going to fight homelessness? Like it's
Make them go away. I don't want to see it.
yeah, and the cops like, we're not legally allowed to do that. Well, you're not doing your job. It's because in most people's minds, that's what the police are for. They're there to apply force to you know, people who are poor or dark or inconvenient. And like
Yep.
that's that's the disconnect, is like they don't want to defund the police and they don't want social workers. They want like more batons. Like they want like tasers. They want like these people to get roughed up and like shoot away. Like that that's that's conservatism. So like I don't know what else to say other than Trump hasn't remade conservatism. He's just kind of expressing it more clearly, and it
Maybe
embarrasses a lot of
that's
people
what
who
they
are
mean by he says it like it is.
no, no, 1,000%, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he is saying it like it is, and it embarrasses the wealthier Republicans that I tend to associate with, that they don't like it said like that. Like
You're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud, and he does it
it's saying the
all the
quiet part out
time.
loud. Like, they just don't want it done like that. They would prefer that someone with a little bit more tact and diplomacy come in and do the exact same thing, and as aggressively. Like, if somebody acted just like Trump but was nice about it, that guy would be on Rushmore. Like, you would have every
So
Republican like lining up to get that guy the
so
fifth
Tom
slot.
Cotton.
Yeah, Tom Cotton's got no personality. Like,
Yeah,
he's a block of wood. Like,
he's about as interesting as white stale bread. Oh,
yeah,
because he is.
because he is. I think that, yeah, like a Tom Cotton with any kind of like social skill or charisma could be something, but like
That
I don't know.
guy they had speak at the RNC and then did the bullhorn about the guy working for Booker. Maybe him.
I'm trying to think, who is that?
I don't remember. There's a couple of them. There's a guy with I don't remember the other guy's name, but Touring News mentioned him, and we just would do an episode on him or something. But
It's hard to hit the trifecta because you get plenty of guys like Matt Gaetz who are
yeah,
like, they're more than happy to go like be as Trumpy as possible, but they're ultimately just like mini me's. Like, they're just either pretenders or lesser versions that just don't have the same swing. Like, finding somebody that's like competent at things, but also charismatic and also totally devoid of any kind of soul. Like, weirdly, just any of those things you need to get to a line. eh, it just it's like trying to balance out. Uh, uh, I don't know.
trying to min
So,
max a charismatic lawful evil person in D&D.
yeah, but it's like almost like you think about like you know, like your X-Men, who you might have like, a group of people who are all good at one thing, but nobody's really good at everything.
Yeah.
Then you always wind up fighting some supervillain who's like super smart, super strong, super tough. Like, the villain tends to be like complete package where it's like doesn't really have like a specific weakness because he is used to fighting everybody at the same time. You don't really ever see that in nature. Like,
Oh
it
yeah.
tends to just not happen, which is why they make great villains. It's like, wow, wouldn't that be terrifying if somebody was smart and strong and
Wait.
tough and this and that and good looking and you know,
Right.
I just it just tends to be that the more you are given in certain areas, then you tend to maybe be lazy. And the other, it's like, I've got all these things. Why should I work hard? Oh
Yeah.
no, he's a hard worker too. Like,
No ambition. Yeah, I
no
gotcha.
ambition. Yeah, like, I just feel like that's just how it works. Like, if you get too much of anything, you tend to not develop other things because that's your thing. You're like, why would I practice to be a marathon runner when I've got wings? I can fly. Like, I don't need to run fast.
Right.
So.
I gotcha. Well, Art, thank you so much for joining tonight. It was a pleasure. This conversation is fun. We should do it again, just the two of us. If this is your first time joining us, we do have episodes typically on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month on our website, crowdsourcepolitics.org, or your favorite streaming service. As always, keep your head up through your political storm.